A cool, foggy mist topped Shepherd's Hill just before daybreak on the morning of the big battle. As the sun slowly rose in the pinkish sky, it burned away the fog just as the first spectators arrived. Porky's dad, of course, was leading the group, followed by Old Pop's possum. "Holy smokes," Old Pop said with a whistle. "Something done happened to the landscape. That dragon's changed it all up." And he was right, for the hilltop had been miraculously transformed. The enormous rocks from the side of the hill had all been moved, arranged on the grassy meadow to form the seats of an amphitheater. The seating surrounded an outdoor arena, with the dragon's cave rising up from the center. A faint smell of smoke was in the air, and Porky's dad was sure it was coming from the cave, but he could not see inside. For you see, now there were large, richly woven, tattered tapestries covering the entrance to Graham's lair. The enormous oaks and willow trees that flanked the sides were covered with a variety of lanterns and lights, which hung from nearly every bough and branch. The dragon's old upright piano, freshly painted in gold and black lacquer, was nestled underneath a willow covered in half-melted candles. By lunchtime, the area was filling up at a quicker pace. Vendors had arrived and were selling all sorts of food and ale. Others sold tunics, toys, and pennants, just like the ones Kenny had seen in town. Children ran around the stony seats and grassy aisles playing knights and dragons. More than once, Kenny overheard wagers being made on who would come out victorious. Late afternoon brought a surprise no one in town had expected. By now, most everyone from Round Brook was present, and clearly word had spread to the neighboring villages, for there were far more sightseers than there were seats, leaving some to find viewing elsewhere. All were curious about the large, stately procession that was coming from the East Road and heading straight up the hill. One vendor, standing on top of his cart, used his opera glasses to get a better look and cried, "The king! The king is coming!" A large group of onlookers rushed over to get a better view. Sure enough, it was the king himself, arriving in a beautifully ornate horse-drawn carriage. Armed soldiers, who looked like younger versions of George, marched both in front of and behind him. They stopped at the back of the amphitheater and began constructing a small tower with box seats for His Majesty and his courtiers. From a hiding place high in the branches of a tree, Kenny watched the royal servants assemble the tower, finally rolling out a purple carpet for the king to walk upon. The guards flanked both sides of the walkway, preventing any onlookers from getting too close to His Majesty. The king was followed by his two sons, a jester, and George, dressed in his finest clothing. With all eyes watching the king enter the royal box, Kenny hopped down from his hiding spot and scurried back down the hill. "This is just like a giant chess game," he thought to himself. "Now, I just have to move toward a favorable outcome." As the afternoon began to fade into evening, the waiting crowd began to grow restless. The rowdy bunch chanted and stomped their feet in unison. Few of them noticed little Kenny as he lit the lanterns. He knew this was it. It was time to finally set his plan into full motion. Setting alight the last lantern, Kenny looked down at his mother and gave her a nod. She solemnly walked up to the piano, lit the candles, and began playing an ominous melody. Immediately, the entire gathering hushed to a breathy silence and looked toward the arena. Kenny walked slowly to the center of the battlefield. He looked up in awe. He had never seen this many people gathered together in his entire life. Strangely, the Riverstone feeling was not present. Instead, he felt a fiery flicker of a feeling, something that cavorted about his insides. This was not a book report. There would be no grade handed to him at the end of this. Either his plan would work, or one of his friends might not see the sunset that day. But they all trusted him. His mom, his dad, George, Graham, even Charlotte. They thought his plan was ingenious, and now it was all up to him. He looked down at his two little paws, took a deep breath, and slowly opened a large leather-bound book. He began to read in a shaky voice. Draco, Latin for dragon, and derived from the Greek word drakonta. It's the biggest of all living creatures on Earth. At this, murmurs and hushes were heard throughout the audience. Kenny continued. The fiery feeling danced throughout his chest and heart. When the dragon comes out of its cave, it is often carried into the sky, borne into the air surrounded by blazes, for indeed it is rising up from the lower regions of Hades. Audible gasps could be heard at this point. One mother put her paws over her child's ears. The fiery feeling rushed up into Kenny's throat. He continued loud and clear so that nobody could miss a single word, and he said, A dragon's strength is found within its long and dangerous tail. Tying the tail in a knot will render the foul beast harmless. But be warned, all drakes kill anything they catch with their vicious coils. Kenny slammed the book shut, and the crowd jumped back in their seats. He asked aloud with a fiery feeling dancing on his tongue, Who among us shall vanquish this menacing scourge from our land? I shall, announced George in a clear voice. Everyone turned toward the royal box and watched him stride down the aisle, escorted by beautiful Charlotte. She was draped in elegant, ornate white robes, with ribbons and flowers wrapped around her head. The knight was adorned in his golden armor, which had been polished to a mirror-like shine. He held his decorated shield in one hand, Charlotte's arm in the other, and a crimson silken cape billowed and danced about behind them both as they walked toward the battlefield.